Library discussion is my understanding. If everybody is interested in the pornography in the libraries, you're in the right place. If you want to hear about the weaponization of the Department of Justice, you need to move toward the front. Alright, so I'm Scott Gray, this is my wife Angela. We've been leading the fight in Saline County against the Saline County Library. And we're trying, our point here is not to focus on Saline County, but that's our, where we're getting a lot of the information. But what we found is this information will be relevant to most libraries, especially most public libraries. There's also issues with the school libraries, which is another animal. Fortunately, Act 372, let's all give a round of applause to Senator Dan Sullivan and all the co-sponsors for getting that through the legislature. And so that will go into effect August 1st, pending the litigation that is underway. But that at least gives us a process to challenge the books. And what we found is that, in our situation in Saline County, is that our core and court members didn't know about any of this stuff. When we took these books and started checking these books out of the library, and you have to take them around to them individually, or you have to go to a core and court meeting and hold them up and show them to them. They won't let you read them because they're too bad to read in a public meeting. At a core and court meeting, but yet it's okay for your 7-year-old to check them out from the library. So what you have to do is you have to get the books in front of the core and court meeting. And to be honest, so this is a multi-step process. Supposedly you're supposed to meet with the librarian. Well, that's useless because they're communists. The second step, Missy, am I right? So the second step, I'll preach a little bit. The second step is to go to either the library board or the special committee appointed by the librarian. Guess what kind of people the librarian appoints to her committee? Her own communist employees. So then the next step, then you get into some people you actually might have elected. So then you get to go to the county legislature or quorum court as we have in Arkansas, and you actually get some action. So what we did is we just kind of blew all that off, those steps 1 and 2, because we knew we were going to get nowhere. And we had a few people go through the formal challenge process. One of them was our county judge, Matt Brumley. He challenged a book, and guess what? He hadn't even had a hearing yet. He's the darn county judge, and the librarian, who is from California, by the way, they imported her to Saline County to run our library in our 75% Republican county. So she won't even give him a hearing. She's set a few dates and just kind of pushed it back and that kind of thing. So the book he challenged, All Boys Aren't Blue, which is just full of, it's full of pornography and all kinds of wild nonsense. And so they said, well, we've got to have our panel read that book, so we're going to use your tax dollars and buy 7 more copies of that book to pass it around to our employees so they can read it to fully understand everything. I mean, you can read 2 sentences on page 1 and you get it, okay? So they got to read the book, and that's not, and it takes a few months to read a 200-page book. So we got to stall and delay, and it's a game to these people. So we got so he gets the book and fills out the paperwork. One of the things on the form says you have to have read every word of that book. Well, a lot of our folks are good Christians, and they want to challenge the books, but they really don't want to read that stuff themselves. So that's another issue. So he and I believe him. Brumley's a good Christian man, and he tells the truth. So he took the time and he bought the book himself to keep from taking it out of the library, and he read the book, read all of it. Well, the more he read, the worse it gets. So he challenges the book, he fills out the form, he attaches 3 or 4 pages of additional references and data to show that he's very, very thorough. She won't even get him to hear it. So, in the meantime, we had already kind of figured out where this was going to go. So we went to the quorum court, and we have 13 elected Republicans on the quorum court. 3 of them are actual Republicans. And we got a few more that, depending on, that they kind of put their finger up in the air and they see which way the wind's blowing. And we got 2 just left-wing, just far left Democrats that run as Republicans. But, so the balance of them kind of see which way the wind's blowing, right? And they vote right a lot of times. So we focused on the ones that would listen. And we got these folks to look at some of the books, and we took them around to them. We got one guy that's just terrified of any kind of meetings that we were out having to go take stuff to his store, and we take them to this other lady's house. I mean, it's a process. But what we found is they were so appalled, even the rhinos were so appalled by these books that I think at this point we got 10 of 13 votes. So in the meantime, we start a process, and I'm not following her schedule at all. She's got a nice agenda. I'm just covering until she gets her computer ready. So we go through and we figure out that the quorum court, we figure out which ones are on our side and that sort of thing. So you've got the quorum court members get agitated. Well, in the meantime, we start FOIAing things from the library, because we figure if she's bringing in these books, how much is she spending on these books? I don't know what your library budget is in your county. Ours is $4.167 million, which is roughly 1/3 the budget of the entire county goes to the county library. I see Bob Fedor's about to have a heart attack over that figure. So we're spending $550,000 a year buying new books, most of which they're modern, so that tells you something. It costs the taxpayers of Saline County $14 and some change for every book that crosses the county. Every book that's checked out, it costs $14 and change. 9 of that 14 is labor. So if you ran a business, you ran a store of some sort, and it was costing you $9 every time somebody checked out a cup of coffee or some donuts or something, would you be able to stay in business very long with that expense? So anyway, we started looking into this and finding out all kinds of stuff, and y'all are welcome. Our pages are both open, but on Facebook, and we post some of these receipts. Scott Gray, Angela Gray, I'll tell you about the website in a minute too. So they've been buying alcohol, beer, wine with our tax dollars. I mean, all kinds of nefarious stuff, gas for their cars, all kinds of stuff they can't account for. So it goes way beyond books, but had they not had the pornographic books, the kids section, we probably never would have looked into all this. So now the windows are open, the blinds are open, and we're starting to see stuff. Unfortunately, the Arkansas FOIA law, it's a good law, 3 days, right, Wayne? They're supposed to respond. They don't. 3 months, maybe, in some cases. In some cases, they'll respond and say they got it. In a lot of cases, they won't respond at all. We'll go back in a week or 2 and say, what's the status of this? We've been very kind and understanding that it takes a while. You know, they only got 50-something employees down there at the library, so they're kind of short-staffed, right? So you take these FOIAs, and so we're just now starting to get stuff really that we asked for in April. So the longer this goes on, the worse it gets, right? Because they're not going to turn over the really bad stuff first. They're going to turn over the easy stuff. So they get to the point that they start turning over just little tidbits of this stuff, and it will just, you start looking at it and it just blows your mind how the taxpayers are being ranked by the library and by the people running the library. So, back to the books. We've taken, and this is a very small sample because it's just, I built this site in a weekend, okay? I don't have any staff or anybody to do this, but just the books she's checked out from the library, we set up a website and it gets attacked constantly. So if it's down, wait 3 minutes, it'll be back up. SeleneLibrary.com. So if you go to SeleneLibrary.com, chances are you've got some of these books in your library. And the bigger your library is, and the more tax dollars there are in your county, the more of these books you're going to have. So we've compared with some of the stuff that Courtney's found in Lonoke County, and they actually have a few we don't have, but we have some that they don't. But a lot of them are the same. And what were the really bad books? These are bad, okay? They've got picture books for kids that are nudity and all kinds of stuff. But if you want to get into the I don't even know what the word is. If you want to get into the really gross stuff, there's this deal called Overdrive. Anybody know what Overdrive is? Your kids at school can use their taxpayer-provided device to log in to this deal called Overdrive. And it gives them access to all the books in the library, all the available books online, whether they're in the library or not, all funded by we the taxpayers. So you could, your 7-year-old, they're savvy enough to get on the website. They don't have to have parents' permission. They don't have to have an ID. They don't have to have anything other than their school provided, whatever they're called, device. And they can look at all the porn they want. They can look at any of it. And it's all open right there for them. And unfortunately, Act 372 didn't fix that. We thought SB 66 might, but it turns out it doesn't. Correct me if I say anything wrong. But we're going to have to fix that in the legislature with respect to this electronic stuff. Because the electronic is even worse than the printed books. And they say they got free speech rights and all this stuff. And the problem is, they got kids sections and they label them for different age groups, right? Or maybe they don't. They have, in our library, they have, what are the 3 ones?
The picture book, the juvenile section, and Y, which is young adult.
So picture, juvenile, and young adult. Well, but there's nothing that prevents a 7-year-old from going to the young adult area, right? It's like, that's a shelf, it's like right there. So they classify young adult as 12 to 18. Well, some of the very worst books in the library, they're targeting these books toward these teenagers because they're trying to push these agendas on the teenagers to push their agenda of deviant behaviors and that sort of thing. And so a lot of this stuff is not just pornography, it's anti-American, it's pro-communist, it's to try CRT, critical race theory, it's intended to keep kids separated from their parents. And some of the books that we check out, even in the picture book section, that's intended for the little kids, says, things like, if you think say you're a boy, and you think you might feel like you ought to be a girl, you don't need to go talk to your parents, you need to go talk to your librarian. Because, they're the most qualified, right? Your local librarian would be way more qualified than your parents or a doctor, except to talk about gender. Or they say to talk to, some school counselor and things like that. Whatever you do, don't talk to your parents. So that's kind of the way they're pushing this agenda. And they've got so much in there and so many ways of getting to your kids. And a lot of y'all have probably seen Sound of Freedom. the new movie, and you know, this is all a big effort by the left and the radical left, to quote our governor, and the communists, quite frankly, because that's what they are, to separate kids from their parents, to push this whole narrative, to slow down the birth rates, and make everybody gay or LG, whatever, right? Don't keep up with the acronyms because they change all the time. But it's all an agenda. But you can do something about it. Because if you will go to your court and show these books, in a lot of cases, and we've even found Democrats who are appalled by some of these books. So they might not agree on economics, or the writers don't agree with us on taxes even, and some other things. But they'll be likely to agree with you on some basic moral issues. And this, to me, is a basic moral issue that a lot of people can agree on. We've even had some Democrats come to our county committee, because we've been having library committee meetings. And you can have a library committee within your county committee or your women's group. Ours is officially through the women's group. And they'll get involved in this, especially if they got kids. So that's just one of the ways. Set up a committee to investigate the books, to check them out, to pass them around to your electeds. And in some cases, that might mean your city council, if your city government is involved in your library. Some of them are, like in Jonesboro. But the county libraries, you go to court members, and let them know, because like I said, we might disagree on a lot of things with some of these folks, but you find agreement on these basic moral issues. And so you say, well, what's the next step once you get them to agree there's a problem, right? So in our county, they are in the process of passing an ordinance, a county ordinance, because it says that the county judge has control or authority over the library and the library board. Well, the library board is comprised of, or was comprised of 5 Democrats. Now, we're in a 75% Republican voting county, but there were 5 Democrats on the board. So one of them immediately resigned when we brought this up, so then there were 4, and the court appointed somebody from our committee. So then another one resigned, and they're about to appoint, hopefully, another Republican. So within a few months, we hope to have a majority of Republicans on that board. And so you've got to put pressure on them. You've got to keep pressure on them. You've got to send FOIAs, because that takes up their time, and that causes them to have to respond and realize that the public's after them. You've got to attend the library board meetings. They may have different levels of power in different communities, but show up at their meetings, and they have them at the most inconvenient times. Ours is at 3:30 on Mondays, and it changes from time to time. And so you've got to find somebody who will let you know when these meetings take place, because a lot of times they'll say, well, we're going to, they had one scheduled for last week, so we went to it, and they said, well, we pushed it back to next week. So then you got to go back. But anyway, if you go to the board meetings, you let them know the public is involved, you get your court involved, get an ordinance that puts your county judge or your court over the library board. And so they have the authority to hire and fire. Because if yours is set up like ours, only the library board can hire the director. Well, you know, it all starts at the top, right? So she's got a bunch of, and the type of people she's hiring are more freaks and weirdos and demons, right? Let's just be honest. So if you change the top, then that's going to change the 50-something people below her, because those positions turn over pretty regularly. So once we get her fired, and we went public, we passed a resolution in our county committee meeting that the court should fire the library director and replace her with somebody who better reflects the values of the community. And you can do that if you pass these resolutions in your county committee, and then you got to publicize it. I mean, you can't just pass it. You got to send it out, because I don't know if y'all are like us, but every elected does not attend our county committee meetings. Sometimes we'll have 1 or 2, and sometimes we'll have 6 or 8. But you got to get it in front of them, let them know that the county committee has passed this resolution and demands that they do something. And ours is all posted on our website, SalineRepublicans.com. If you want to read ours or use ours and adapt it to your use or whatever. We post all of our resolutions and press releases on SalineRepublicans.com. And so this whole idea of these different steps is all about applying pressure to the electeds to do something. Because before 372, we didn't really have a whole lot of authority to do something. Well, now the people are taking that back. And if your electeds won't do anything about them, what do? You replace the electeds. Run against them. Replace them. I mentioned some of those people on the quorum court. One of them's already the main one that's for the pornography in the library books has already announced that he's not running for re-election. They don't like the pressure because they're accustomed to an easy, cushy job. Wayne Long shaking his head, yes. They're accustomed to showing up in 30 minutes, signing off on some stuff, rubber stamping some stuff, and going to the house and collecting their pay. So once they realize that there's more to it than that the job's more intelligent, then people who are actually interested in doing something positive for the county and for the kids will be able to get those jobs. And it might not be as hard as you think. Like I say, we're already having them draw, and I expect another few might decide that they don't want to run for re-election.
Go ahead.
I'm Lauren Clark. I'm from Lawrence County, UJP. Also a retired educator. I would like to check our library. We are next door to Breakout County, and we've seen the blood bath over there. Haven't heard any rumblings out of our library, but is there something y'all could recommend as to how to
That's what I'm
check?
going to talk about.
She's going to tell you how to check it.
Talk about it. So, as most of y'all probably know, this is a nationwide issue. It is not limited to Arkansas, it's not limited to Texas, it's not limited to one county. You will be shocked. Most people say, oh, it's not in my county, it's not happening in my county. That's what I said. I said that. I said, oh no, we're red. No, it's not down in the Saline County Library. Oh yeah, it was. The ALA, the American Library Association, is the one pushing this agenda. I mean, all Arkansas libraries adhere to the American Library Association Bill of Rights. They post it, they live by it. That's just where it's coming from. There is no all-encompassing list of all the books. The books are so vast. I mean, there's different places to find the books and lists. People have worked all over the country. Mom groups here, and there's not a whole bit, one list to go after and look at. I've got some pages on Twitter that I follow, and those are some of the ones that I have gotten some of the lists that I went by and went and found in our library. One good, and I'll flip back through these. One good website is ratedbooks.org. You can go, it's a very, very, very good list. Some moms have made the list, they made the website, they have rating, basically their own rating system that they're going by, and they have, I like to call it a cliff notes of the books. So basically they have gone through the books, and they have gone, if y'all know what cliff notes are, and they've gone through page by page showing what the problem is on that page. The explicit pictures, the explicit words, whatever. And so that's a really good, so what we did was we went and, well, I went to that website and I just picked some books and I would go over and cross-reference with our online website, our library website. And our website, and most of them around the state, most of the websites, the libraries have websites. And you can actually, without even entering a library card or anything, you can cross-reference the rated books to your own website, your own library website, and find out if they have the book, is it electronic? It'll tell you if it's actually on the shelf, all that kind of information.
Will it tell you how frequently the book is used?
No, that is something you have to FOIA. He has asked, and it'll ask you how often the book has been checked out. And I was told by my county judge, which was, I know he was told by the library director, but she was like, oh, well, some of those books that she checked out were going to be tossed. They weren't going to toss them. I can't even get the list from her. I have FOIA'd it 3 times. She refuses to give me a list of how often the books were checked out. And she just completely, disregards and will not send that to me. So that's how I got started. I just cross-referenced, and you can go into the library and look at, especially what is out on the shelves and in displays. I mean, they love to display the bad books on top of the shelves and stuff.
Jennifer's pointing her fingers. Do we have any other questions? And let's, any of this stuff, if y'all want any of this information or any specifics on some of these websites and such, if you go to SaleneRepublicans.com, you can just contact us through there, and we'll be glad to answer. Yes?
Did you say that?
What about school libraries?
Well, I do not have a kid in school, and it's been a really hard, she's asking about school libraries. As far as school libraries, it's been a real hard thing for us to crack. I know there are other people around the state that have gone into their school libraries. You have to know somebody that will go into the school library and is willing to help you. And that's the way they get into the school library. So they're real closed book about just allowing people from the community to go into the library. So
In the green?
Did you say that your county committee or your county forum court passed an ordinance putting the director and the board members under direct?
Yeah, they're on the second reading and will actually be passed in August.
I'd like to get some information from you, because I've been told, and I'm on the court, and we've supposedly got 11 Republicans. I can maybe think of 2. But I've been told that we can't. But if y'all pass it, I'd like to get a copy of it and try to get Creighton County to do that.
it is actually, you can go to, and I can talk to you after, you can go to our Quorum Court website, and they actually have the ordinance listed, and they've already done the first reading. They are supposed to do the second reading this month and the third reading in August and pass it in August.
Thank you very much.
Okay, can we have a round of applause for the Braves, please? Please follow them on Reopen Arkansas. And of course, they're very accessible, and I'm sure they'll be around afterwards if you have any more questions. So we're very grateful for you too. Carrie Lake is scheduled to get her early, so we're going to keep on moving right along, okay? So next up is Charles Fuqua. He is, let me see, where is he? He's going to come on up here, and he is the author of God's Law. He will be talking about the financial system, money creation, and de-dollarization. Thank you so much, sir, for being here. So he's going to get set up, and then we're going to keep moving right along.
Actually, I am not the author of God's Law. God is. I am author of the book God's Law, the Only Political Solution. So are we hooked in now? Okay, I have those books for sale in the back. I don't know if the microphone's picking me up well or not, is it? Okay, I've got an hour presentation that I've got to get into a half an hour, so I'm running. Okay, keep going. Okay. First of all, I'm going to start off by telling you what I'm going to tell you. Here's a summary of my presentation. The Constitution and the Founding Fathers held that the federal government should create our money supply. If you advocate for that today, you are called a communist. Our money supply is created by privately owned banks as debt. Most people don't believe that. International bankers financed the communist revolution in Russia. The international bankers want a one-world communist government with them in charge. The bankers are in the process of destroying all nations. Okay, other than that Jesus is Lord, what I will share with you today is the most important information you will ever receive. Okay, who am I? Well, I've authored this book, and you can see my email address and my phone number. I'm a Coast Guard veteran. 43 years ago, I learned this truth, and my life has been a war ever since. I have been a biology, chemistry, and physics teacher, a research biologist, an adjunct professor of business law, the vice chairman of the Washington County Republican Committee. I've been an Arkansas state representative, attorney for the state of Arkansas, Office of Chief Counsel, an election commissioner for Independence County Republican chairman, and vice chairman of the 2nd Congressional District. If you'd like, stop by my table, visit my wife, and give her your name and email address. I'd like to put you on my list. The world's gone crazy. All these things that you see listed here are just insanities that are going on today. I would suggest to you that there is a common cause for all this craziness. I'm going to use quotes from famous people so that you know that I'm not the only person that believes what I'm telling you today. Is it possible that there are people in the world that want total control of everyone and everything? Who would have the wealth to do this? That's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm going to use quotes from famous people. These are not my ideas. Start off with John Adams. He said, all the perplexities, confusion, and distress in America arise not from defects in the Constitution or Confederation, not from want of honor or virtue so much as from downright ignorance of the nature of coin, credit, and circulation. That is as true today as it was in his day. The United States Constitution says, Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof, not some private institution. President Andrew Jackson said, if Congress has the right under the Constitution to issue paper money, it was given them to be used by themselves, not to be delegated to individuals or corporations. President Jefferson said, if the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of all property until their children wake up homeless on a continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs. And I've included a little quote by Klaus Schwab at the bottom. You will own nothing and be happy. That's their goal. Mayor Amschel Rothschild said, let me issue the control of a nation's money, and I care not who writes its laws. Thomas Jefferson said, "The Bank of the United States is one of the most deadly hostilities existing against the principles and form of our Constitution." President Andrew Jackson declared his disdain for the international bankers. He said, "You are a den of vipers. I intend to rout you out, and by the eternal God, I will rout you out. If the people only stood the rank injustice of our money and banking system, there would be a revolution before morning." That is true today, but the people do not understand the injustice. I hope I will let you have a glimpse of that today. President Thomas Jefferson said, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. Already they have raised up a money aristocracy that has set the government at defiance. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs." The Rothschild brothers of London, the greatest banking family on earth, said this: "The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or be so dependent upon its favors that there will be no opposition from that class. While on the other hand, the great body of people mentally incapable of comprehending the tremendous advantage that capital derives from the system will bear its burdens without complaint, and perhaps without even suspecting that the system is inimical to their interests." President Jefferson said, "The modern theory of the perpetuation of debt has drenched the earth with blood and crushed its inhabitants under burdens ever accumulating." That is more true today than it was in Jefferson's day. President James Madison said, "History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance." President Abraham Lincoln said, "The money power preys upon the nation in times of peace and conspires against it in times of adversity. It is more despotic than monarchy, more insolent than autocracy, more selfish than bureaucracy. It denounces as public enemies all who question its methods or throw light on its crimes." President Abraham Lincoln said, "The government should create, issue, and circulate all the currency and credits needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. By the adoption of these principles, the taxpayers will be saved immense sums of interest. Money will cease to be master and become the servant of humanity." Thomas Edison said this: "If our nation can issue a dollar bond, it can issue a dollar bill. The element that makes the bond good makes the bill good. The difference between the bond and the bill is that the bond lets the money brokers collect twice the amount of the bond and an additional 20%, whereas the currency pays nobody but those who directly contribute in some useful way. It is the people who constitute the basis of government credit. Why then cannot the people have the benefit of their own gilt-edged credit by receiving non-interest-bearing currency instead of bankers receiving the benefit of the people's credit in the interest-bearing bonds? If the United States government will adopt this policy of increasing its national wealth without contributing to the interest collector, for the whole national debt is made up on interest charges, then you will see an era of progress and prosperity in this country such as could never have come otherwise." President Theodore Roosevelt said, "The issue of currency should be lodged with the government and be protected from domination by Wall Street. We are opposed to provisions which would place our currency and credit system in private hands. Shortly after he left office, that's exactly what happened. President Woodrow Wilson signed the 1913 Federal Reserve Act. A few years later, he wrote, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and of all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." Sir Josiah Stamp, who was president of the Bank of England, said this in 1927 at a commencement speech in Texas. I think this is my favorite quote on money. He said, "The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Banking was conceived in iniquity and born in sin. Bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money. And with the flick of a pen, they will create enough money to buy it back again. Take this great power away from them, and all great fortunes like mine will disappear." He was said to be the second richest man in Great Britain. "And they ought to disappear, for then this would be a better and happier world to live in. But if you want to continue to be the slaves of the bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, then let bankers continue to create money and control credit." Robert Hempel, 8 years credit manager of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, said this: "If all bank loans were paid, no one would have a bank deposit, and there would not be a dollar of currency or coin in circulation. This is a staggering thought. We are completely dependent on the commercial banks. Someone has to borrow every dollar we have in circulation, cash or credit. If the banks create ample synthetic money, we are prosperous. If not, we starve. We are absolutely without a permanent monetary system. When one gets a complete grasp upon the picture, the tragic absurdity of our hopeless position is almost incredible. But there it is. The banking problem, is the most important subject intelligent persons can investigate and reflect upon. It is so important that our present civilization may collapse unless it is widely understood and its defects remedied very soon. Henry Ford said this: "It is well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and money system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." This next quote is really important. It's from John Kenneth Galbraith, who was professor of economics at Harvard. Listen, you will find, if you did debate people on the topic of money and money creation, they will tell you, well, you're not bright enough to understand this. Believe me, you are. Here's what he said: "The study of money above all other fields in economics is one in which complexity is used to disguise the truth or to evade truth, not to reveal it. The process by which banks create money is so simple the mind is repelled. Something so important deserves a deeper mystery seems only decent." Okay, this is from Martin Luther. Now, this was written in the 1500s. Okay, am I not switching?
It's switching.
Okay. Here's what Martin Luther said: After the devil, there is no greater human enemy on earth than a miser and a usurer. What is usury? We're led to believe it's charging an exorbitant rate of interest. It is not. Usury is the practice of creating money as debt, loaning it into existence, and earn interest off of what was created at no expense out of nothing. That is what banking is. Okay, here's what he said. After the devil, there is no greater human enemy on earth than a miser and a usurer, for he desires to be above everyone. Turks, Muslims, soldiers, and tyrants are also evil men. Yet they must allow the people to live. Indeed, they must now and then be somewhat merciful. But a usurer and a miser belly desires that the entire world would be ruined in order that there be hunger, thirst, misery, and need, so that he can have everything, and so that everyone must depend on him and be his slave as if he were God. The world is one big whorehouse, completely submerged in greed, where the big thieves hang the little thieves. That's going on today, isn't it? Okay, now I'm going to explain something to you. One time I took my family on vacation to Chicago, and we visited the Museum of Science and Industry. Down in the basement was an exhibit on banking, and they had models of bank buildings through history. And as I walked backward through the exhibit, I noticed that the first model was a Babylonian temple. And the exhibit explained where banking came from and how it was created. And I'm going to explain that to you. In Babylon, the money was wheat. And there was a grain bank in Babylon where people could take their excess wheat to store it. The banker, the grain banker, would issue a receipt for the wheat. Now, over time, the tendency developed in Babylonian society that if people wanted to spend their wheat, rather than take it back to the grain banker and get wheat for the receipt, they could simply spend the receipt. The receipts were issued in many denominations. Well, the grain banker at time would loan out his own wheat at interest. One day somebody came to borrow wheat, and the borrower said, you know, I don't need this wheat to eat or to plant. I need it to spend. Well, the grain banker looked in his supply of wheat. It was already all loaned out at interest. He didn't have any of his own wheat to loan out. But then the person said, if you would just issue me one of your receipts, rather than give me wheat, I can take it and spend it. And the grain banker thought, that wheat just sits there. People continually spend my receipts. Who would know if I had more receipts outstanding for wheat than I have wheat? So what he did was he sat down and he issued a second receipt for a unit of wheat that already had a receipt issued against it. 2 receipts for 1 unit of wheat. Now I'm going to ask you, was that honest? That is the birth of banking. And banking today is conducted in exactly the same way, only to a far greater extreme. Now, I'd like to ask people 2 thought-provoking questions, and I want you to think about this. When the government deficit spends, does it get deeper in debt? Yes. It does, doesn't it? Yes. When the government deficit spends, does it print money to cover the debt? Everybody always says yes. The answer to both of those questions cannot be yes. I want you to think about this. If you had the legal authority to create money, would you ever be in debt? No. And the truth is, our government does not create our money supply. Our money supply is created by privately owned banks. They create it by writing checks upon themselves exactly as the Babylonian grain banker did. There's 4 entities involved in money creation in the United States. First, the United States government. What starts the process is the government deficit spends. So it prints a bond. Anybody can buy that bond. You, me, China. If any of those entities buy the bond, no new money's created. But the buyer of last resort is the Federal Reserve banking system. Now, many of us believe that's part of the government. It's not. The 12 regional Federal Reserve banks are each owned by member commercial banks in their district. So what happens is the government creates a bond, the Federal Reserve System buys the bond simply by crediting the government's checking account. Then the government can spend the money, and then the government taxes the people to pay the amount of the bond plus interest to the bankers that created it out of nothing at no expense. Now let that sink in a little bit. Why are the bankers so powerful? Why can they move towards a one-world government? Because we give them the unlimited right to create money out of nothing. Okay, now, there's a second level of money creation. If you go to a bank to borrow money, where does the bank get the money it loans to you? Most of us believe that savers deposit their money in savings accounts. The bank pays them one rate of interest, then the bank lends it out to borrowers at a higher rate of interest. Now, isn't that how most of us believe it works? But I want you to think about this. Inflation is running what percent right now? 9%? That's the government figure. It's probably a lie. It's probably higher than that. Okay, what can you make on a savings deposit right now? What? 1%? It may be a little better than that. Okay, so is putting money in a bank and a savings account a winning or a losing proposition? Losing. And that's why almost nobody puts much money in savings accounts. But banks are making loans. Where are they getting the money? They're getting it exactly as the Babylonian grain banker did. The reserve ratio until recently was 1 to 10. That meant if a bank had $10 million average daily deposits in their clients' checking accounts, they could loan out $10 million, 10 times as much. Well, where'd the money come from? They just wrote a check on themselves. The money is created when the check is given to the borrower. That's where our money comes from. And you think, well, wow, why doesn't the money supply just explode? Now, I want you to think about this. When you pay a loan back, what happens to the money you pay back? Now, I want you to think back on the Babylonian grain banker. He could be paid back in one of 2 things. What were they? His own notes, and what else? Okay, grain. If you paid him back in grain, he had more reserves to make more loans. If you paid him back in his own notes, what are those worth to him? They're trash. He tears them up and throws them away. And as you pay down your loan, that money is destroyed. It goes out of existence. But what does the bank gain off of that money it created at no expense out of nothing? It earned interest. Now, I want you to think about this. Our money system has a fatal flaw. All money in existence is created at one of those 2 levels. When the federal government borrows from the Fed, or when the people borrow from commercial banks. All money in existence is created out of nothing as debt. All money in existence must be paid back to the money creator plus interest. How do you pay the money creator more money than he has created? There's only one way that system can work. Debt must constantly grow. Now, is government debt constantly growing? Is personal debt constantly growing? And the people and the government fall deeper and deeper in debt to the owners of the privately owned banking system. Now, that's the way it works in America. Almost every country in the world has a banking system similar to ours. Now, there's one major country with an exception, and that's a country by the name of Russia. Look and see what the debts of various nations are. You know what nation is the largest debtor on earth? USA. Okay? Of major nations, you know what nation has the lowest debt to GDP ratio? Russia. Why is Russia so hated? Why is Vladimir Putin the most hated man on earth? Because he has freed the Russian people from debt bondage. That's why he's so hated. You know, Russia rejected communism over 30 years ago. The war in Ukraine is all about wanting the United States and Russia to get in a conflict that destroys both of them so that the chosen nation of the bankers can take complete control of the earth. What nation is that today? It is China. That's the conflict that's going on today. In that war, the good guys are the Russians. And I could give you a whole history of that war, but believe me, what our news media is telling us is all lies. Okay. What's the solution? Well, the great economist Milton Friedman gave a three-point solution. He said the U.S. government should create debt-free money and spend it into existence. That's what we all believe is happening now, but it's not. Then he said balance government spending and taxation to supply the people with a debt-free money supply to carry on commerce. 3, make the reserve ratio 1-to-1. That would mean that the way banks operate is the way you all believe they operate. They take in savers' money at one rate of interest, loan it out at a higher rate of interest, and make their profit off the difference. Some of you are old enough to remember savings and loans. The banking law of 1980 by 1990 drove all of them out of existence. That's the way banks should operate. In 1917, Jacob Schiff, the agent of the Rothschild banking family, provided $20 million for the triumph of communism in Russia. Emperor Nicholas II and his entire family were murdered. The Russian people endured communist hell for over 100 years. And that's why they know how bad communism is. George Soros is the mouthpiece and front man for the international bankers. If he wants something, they want it. Okay, am I done?
We do have, it was 5:30.
Okay, well then I'm going to quit. But the principle of this is we've got to repeal the Federal Reserve Act and have Congress create our money. Thank you.
Expert on the financial system. Hallelujah, right? With everything that's going on today. So with that, we'll go ahead and move on to Jason Bollinger, who's Faulkner County Chairman. And by the way, Garrett Ziegler is going to be in that room talking about the 100-run laptop. Jason's going to be in here talking about the 24 ground game. You know, y'all can go back and forth. That's kind of the idea on that. Jason, he has done, by the way, Jason has done an absolutely amazing job with a new twist on the 24 ground game that has been, I really enjoyed seeing his presentation. So, Jason?
All right. While we're getting that on there, so I have a good announcement to make. We've been at this for an hour, and unlike the White House, there have not been any unidentified bags of cocaine found. to talk about Hunter's laptop over there, so no guarantees that won't happen in the next half hour, but we'll see. So, I can't see it, so are we on there? All right, so I am Jason Bollinger, and I'll introduce the chairman for Fuqua County. So I've been in this role for about 2.5 years, and have learned a lot about elections. And some stuff I've learned from the RNC. I had a trip to DC for a training up there, and some various experiences, and so I'm going to try to do a whole lot of content in 30 minutes. So with that, the flow of this is going to be very, very brisk. It's definitely over 30 minutes worth of content that I'm going to move rapidly along. So if you're running for office or you're just interested in this stuff, there's some things that will be relevant to you. You're going to want to chew on the meat, spit out the bones, but I'm just going to be moving along very quickly. If there's anything else, it might be small text, so move up closer if you need to. But the structure of the training and this information is going to start out more philosophical in nature, and then it's going to become increasingly practical as we progress through the training. And then it's going to end on more of some really concrete tools that you or people that you support can use while running for office. Thank you for the applause back there. All right, so first and foremost, I'm just joking, I'm talking about over there. So we, as Republicans, we are not just here to win elections. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but that's really ultimately not what we're about. Of course we do want to win elections, but I'm not sure about you, but the reason I got involved with the Republican Party is I want to advance conservative principles in the Republican Party platform. So if we win elections, and that is not the outcome, are we attaining the goal that we're pursuing? In my opinion, we are not. So with that, it is my belief, and I think by just common sense and reason would stand to make this true. As you see our Republican Party platform there, if you are an elected official and you disregard what the platform says, or you say, I don't follow the party platform, by definition, how are you Republican? Because that is what Republicans believe, is what's illustrated in our party platform, correct? And so you might be an independent that leans Republican, and that's great. I'll take that definitely over someone who leans the other direction, no doubt about it. But the essence of what a Republican is, and the platform for any candidate in Republican, is what is contained in there. Now, that does not mean that is not the gospel. It is not a perfect document by any stretch of the imagination. There are things that we can disagree on. When it comes to our party platform, for instance, we had an initiative in our state that our county took the lead on about closing primaries in our state. And so we took a party platform that was not perfect, never will be perfect, and we modified that. And so that is a very important part of the process. And then also to consider that not all districts are the same. There's some districts that are more blue, some that are more red. But perhaps it's not the values that needs to change between those candidates, but maybe the rhetoric and campaigning, and there's some debate about that, but we want to put the most conservative person we can in a particular district to win. That's our goal. We want to advance those principles and those values. So when it comes to candidate recruitment, so this would be for an open seat perhaps, maybe there's none incumbent that's going to be running. I know it's a lot of text on there, I'm not going to read it all to you, so please read that as I describe what I'm talking about. So each county, and this is in the rules for the Republican Party as well, each county should have a committee appointed by the chairman whose primary responsibility is the recruitment and support of candidates. So with that, we want to review the various offices that are necessary, find people in a community who have relevant skills for that. We want to recruit from the party, of course, but we always want to be starting this process. You don't want to wait until 6 months before filing periods, or, well, who are we going to have to run for this position? You always want to be thinking about who candidates, who are people in the community that share these values, who have the ability to run for office. We always want to be recruiting those people, electing them to make positions that are on the lower level, and then working them up as they cut their teeth a little bit. So you always, when you assess a candidate, getting people that you might have an amazing neighbor. He's your best friend, he walks your dog, you go over there for dinner, but he still may be a terrible candidate, even with an arm next to his name. We need to assess your political worldview to make sure that it aligns with the conservative values that we espouse as a party. Likewise, you may have a very conservative, your other neighbor, he may be very conservative, but he turns out to be a terrible candidate because maybe his family doesn't fully support him, or they can't afford to run the race, or the personal background won't withstand the scrutiny that comes from running for office. So there's practical considerations when we were evaluating candidates. We need to look at the practical aspects of things and also the philosophical meaning of that person. Both things have to converge in order to have an ideal candidate to win the race. So the bench that I'm talking about starts with the county party. Now, you can see those little circles. When I keep saying county party, the reason I say that, who before, and most of you are probably members of your county committees, I would assume, who knew what a Republican county committee was before you joined it? Very few. When you talk about committee, it sounds like maybe some sort of Republican social club, maybe these kind of people that support Republicans. The RNC, the Republican National Convention or Committee, they say that we should not call our counties county committees. We should call them the county party, the Republican Party, the Fuqua Party, the Bollinger County Republican Party. Because people, when you're recruiting people to join your party in your county, they don't know what a county committee is. That's right. And so you should use the verbiage of, I'm the chairman for the Bollinger County Republican Party. That's completely different from the perspective of someone recruiting perhaps than I'm the chairman for the Bollinger County Republican Committee. They don't know what that is. So that's something that you should train your committees or your parties to drop that vernacular, to switch to saying party. Likewise, when you're making Facebook logos, things like that, you should have that say specifically Republican Party of blank county. When someone is looking on Facebook, they're typing in Republican Party of, and that's how they're going to find it, okay? So that the word order matters as well. So you don't want to say, blank county, Republican Party, you want to say blank county, Republican Committee. That's an important thing while growing your party. So when you're evaluating new members, just like with candidates, you want to assess, do they believe in the party platform? Now, in that, this is not a Republican Party purity test. There's only one perfect Republican, and it's me. Just like for you, from your perspective, you are probably the only perfect Republican, right? Because you know exactly what your ideals are, and no one thinks exactly like you. So we're not looking for perfect purity, but what we are looking for is for people who, hey, you know what, there may be some small disagreements about some nuanced things, but for the most part, this is what we believe, and we can have healthy, substantive conversation about that. That your members, that people who want to join your party, start out very early. We do that in Faulkner County. It's a little controversial. I think almost everyone now agrees, wow, that was really effective. And it actually is an opportunity to get to know people very well before they join. You can find out what skills they have, the ways they can assist. But you always need to be continuously recruiting people for your party. Example, here's our Facebook page. So use the Republican Party logo. Everyone knows what that elephant is. It's like Coke. Okay, you recognize Coke in Mexico or China, anywhere else. It's a universal understood logo. That Republican Party elephant is also very well understood. There's some great other renditions. This one's the most well recognized. Use that multi-billion-dollar logo in your logo. And then there's our billboard. We had a billboard during one of the races. And Democrat inflation is higher than this billboard, but Republican. We used our logo on that as well. Just use it everywhere you possibly can. All right. So that is candidate recruitment. Like I said, I'm speeding along here. So when you are building a GOTV campaign, is what it's going to say. That is not a television program. That is Get Out the Vote, is what GOTV stands for. So you are, first thing, as a candidate, you are creating a voter universe. A voter universe is the pool of people that you want to draw from while creating the message for your campaign. So you're going to be considering various things like what goals are we going to have? What type of contact are we going to be doing? How do we want to get people to vote for us? I'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. Can we rally around an issue and compel people to vote for this reason? That's more compelling typically than the candidate. And are there other assumptions in your area that should be factored in? So this is something that most people understand instinctively, but it's very helpful to see it represented graphically. So when you are developing a campaign, I'll go there too in a second. This is a made-up graph, okay? This is all people who are going to be voting in an election. We're not going to spend a lot of time messaging to those people on the far left. Those are people. The x-axis represents whether it's a positive net ballot or a negative net ballot. People on the left are left-leaning. People on the right are conservative people. The y-axis is 100% turnout versus people who very seldom turn out. So on this graph, the people who are most likely to vote for a Republican candidate, walking over here, top right, because those are the people who always turn out, and they're the people who are the most conservative. And so from there, as you're developing a strategy, You can go down the y-axis to like, well, I'm just making sure these people turn out, so I'm gonna get out the vote, maybe drive the polls, that type of stuff. The swing voters, we're gonna persuade those people on why our issues are correct versus the other side, because they're not inherently conservative. And so this is, depending on which group you're targeting with your messaging, is gonna determine your strategy. It's not a one-size-fits-all, okay? So I'm gonna skip over this one, but there's a lot of importance when you're building this. You want to determine your timeline. You want to think about not supporting nonpartisan candidates. They go a lot of hand in hand when you're thinking about an issues approach. So when building your timeline of how you're going to get out your votes, you want to work backwards. So this is also one of the habits of highly effective people, so you can apply it to a campaign as well. Begin with the end in mind. What do I want to accomplish? How many people do I need? And from there, you can work backwards as you're developing a timeline for campaigning. So you have election phases where you're identifying voters, absentee ballots, early voting pushes, and then finally get out to vote where you're motivating people to actively vote. So to do this, you are going to project your turnout. And so you're going to do that by looking at historical data. So on this graph, what you're going to see is election years on the left, and then historical turnout. These are made up numbers, so don't look at that. It's not Arkansas, it's definitely not Fuqua County. So you're going to see what the registered voters are. You're going to see the turnout, and from that you can extrapolate the percent of turnout. You're going to look to see which, is this a primary or is it a general election year? Excuse me, you know what I'm saying, the year that the president's running for president. Is this a main year? Is this not a year? Is it going to be high turnout, low turnout, issues that matter to people? What happened in 2016 versus 2020? That type of stuff. You want to see which of these years is the most similar to what I'm doing. You're going to take the years that are most similar. You're going to look at the current registration versus those years, and then you're going to extrapolate the percent based on the average in the past. And so you're going to do this to build the universe, knowing how many people you need to turn out to vote. You're going to identify target precincts. Not all precincts are the same. So in this made-up example here, you have 3 precincts. There's different shares based on the year, but in this one, precinct 2 had such a small turnout of voters that your time will not be well spent when looking at precinct 2. And so this is something you want to use to inform future races, of course. So this is Walker County, Home Sweet Home. This is a great tool, so write this down. This might be something you ever might use, daysredistricting.org. That's where I generated this map. And what this map will show the partisan lean in any particular voting district or precinct. So you can't see the stuff on the side, but this little dark area on the top of the map, that is just my one full voting precinct in Greenbrier, Arkansas. And in that district, we have a 77.6 Republican turnout. So you can see towards the bottom left, a lot of blue over there. So those are districts that lean more Democrat, and that is in our Conway area, around our colleges. And so depending on the type of district or precinct you're in, that will change your messaging strategy. All right, I think I'm on time here, because I know I might have quit early as well. So executing the plan. So you determine who your voter pool is going to be. How are we going to do this? We work backwards, determining the number of people that we need. There are 3 methods that can be utilized for communicating with voters and turning out votes. The first is registration. We're registering people to vote. We're going to various locations, maybe strategic precincts based on the data you just looked at and say, wow, these people are really conservative leaning. I want to make sure they're all registered to vote. 71% of new Republican registrants vote after they register. 71%, way higher than the average. So a very effective part of getting out the vote campaign is registering good conservatives to go out there and vote. Persuasion. Persuasion is different from turnout. Persuasion is that middle group that, maybe they think that maybe they're okay with taxes, I'm not so sure about Joe Biden, that type of stuff. Those are the people that we have to persuade that maybe they need to vote on our side. And so the messaging for them is to be convincing them about why you're right and your opponent is wrong. And then lastly, turnout. Turnout is for those people that are in those bottom districts on the right-hand side, or that bottom part of the spread, because they're, hey, I vote this way all the time, but I'm just really not motivated to turn out to the polls. Different messaging for those people, convincing them why this race is important, why do they need to show up, making sure they have transportation, bring a friend, all that type of stuff. Different messaging than you would when you're persuading people to actually vote for you. Because we don't want to persuade the other people to go out and vote necessarily, even though we want people to go vote, of course. So when it comes to incorporating campaigns and actually going out there and executing a strategy, one thing that we take into heart in Faulkner County to utilize our dollars and our footsteps is vote splitting. Vote splitting is whenever someone will vote for a presidential candidate or a congressional race, something like that, and then down the ballot, so maybe local people just repeat something like that, that they vote for a different party. It is increasingly uncommon. In 2020, on average, presidential vote shares for Biden and Trump were within 0.5% of congressional results. That means if you can get people to vote on these high, like well-known races, and focusing a lot on those, it will trickle down dramatically and benefit the people lower down the ballot. That is, and there's a whole lot of strategy that comes with that, like messaging, those types of things. Also with campaign dollars, getting people to campaign together because it's mutually beneficial for multiple candidates. And then also nonpartisan races. Nonpartisans, it'll be less, they won't get that trickle down, but focusing on that, their messaging really needs to be out there because they're not inherently going to have an R next to their name, so they may not get that trickle down effect. So that is an important thing to remember. And then also encouraging candidates to participate in the door knocking events, those types of things. So there are 3 ways of determining your goals to how you're going to do door contact. I won't go in necessarily, I won't go into all the details on this one, but it's based off the deficit. That is how many votes you're behind if you're in a blue district in particular, on the universe size and totality, or on the number of volunteers you have. You may be reaching hundreds of thousands of people and only have a handful of volunteers. Well, obviously then it's going to be based on that strategy and identifying the most strategic voters. So with this, your Get Out the Vote campaign should be 125% of your expected turnout. If you're expecting 100,000 people, you should be targeting 125,000 people, because of course people are going to make it. So that's the rule of thumb that the RNC utilizes when they are designing strategies. So 25% more than what you were expecting based on your previous calculations. So why voter contact matters? So there's a lot of value in campaign strategies, sending out mailers, getting word out there. That helps with messaging. But when it comes to door knocking, when it comes to phone calls, if you look at that bottom left picture there, each time the voter is contacted at their door or something, more of the door, but less so with the phone call, their likelihood of voting for a particular candidate increases by 6%. So the more, and now they may already be at 50-50, but if it increases by 6%, 12%, etc., that you get into a good position. And then whenever there's been a team that's been responsible for canvassing a neighborhood, that on average they have seen 15% increase in turnout in those precincts. So if you have a precinct that is heavily red and you're running as a Republican and as a conservative, if you canvass a district that you have to see an increase of 15% versus if you did not do that. And speaking obviously to donors, to supporters, that really helps the candidate find the message as well, and that's a critical component as well. So why doors matter? So doors are the most effective way to contact voters. This is produced survey after survey, with exit polls, various things like that, show that when a candidate goes to someone's door and has a face-to-face conversation, that is the #1 way of convincing somebody. Now, depending on your race, you don't want to, if you go to someone's door and they're immediately, I'm not voting for you, blah, 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 it's not really effective use of your time to stand there for an hour debating with that person. So depending on your voting strategy, the best thing to do probably at that point is to say, hey, thank you, I appreciate you change your mind, but nonetheless, move on to the next person. And so there are times in those precincts that are very red. Say if this is a general campaign to where everyone in a county is voting for you, there might be a time that you knock on every single door. But more times than not, for a lot of our races, you're going to have a targeted list of people who are likely Republican voters, and you're going to be singling out them. And you're going to have, even if you do half the number of doors, because you're skipping so many houses, your door knocking time will be better utilized. Same thing for the volunteers. If they know, I know that John Smith and Sally Smith and this household are most likely Republican voters, and go into those houses. Why phones matter. You can contact voters that can't be reached by the door, at the door, You can identify supporters and collect data, absentee ballots and early voting reminders, and get out the vote. Phones are most effective, not necessarily to convince somebody to vote for you, but it's an effective reminder. Maybe people have made contact in the past to say, hey, you need to show up. So I have 9 minutes left, and I want to take a little bit of time for questions here, but I want to talk about this right here. It's one of the most important things that I'm going to show. The tools for the job. There is one tool in particular that I adore, and that is this picture on the left here. It is called eCanvasser. eCanvasser is an online application that you can use on your phone, your computer, and if you have a group of 15 board members in a day, you have people, especially who are reoccurring, you can have your voter list, people that are, this is my universe I've identified in these precincts. I have them uploaded on the website. Here are the doors. It will show you the most efficient route to take on your phone. And you'll be able to go through and you'll say, Sally opened the door, positive, I can rate on a scale of 1 to 5 how positive the interaction was, make sure their contact information is up to date, and then whenever that board member leaves that door, it is automatically updated to the central database. And then from that database, you can know, I had a favorable conversation with this individual, and now I'm watching who voted early voting, and I can see, well, man, they've not voted yet. I need to make sure I follow that person. That's when the phone banking comes in. So the phone banking will reach out to those people who had already previously been contacted, and now we're making sure that they show up to vote. In my opinion, and that's the most effective way of utilizing this. So eCanvasser, it can get pricey for large campaigns, but for small campaigns, very affordable, and you will definitely get your money's worth, in my opinion. Likewise, some other ways of getting information, the county clerk, of course, has basic information as well that he or she can furnish to you. The GOP data center, your county chairman have that, many other people in the party, you'll have access to that as well. Days Redistricting is the website to show you where you can see the precincts, and you can determine your strategy to know which precincts lean left, which precincts lean right. And then lastly, Call Hub, which is it's an application used for texting, application used for calling. For services like this, you do have to have people opt in if you're using a robocall, but if it is not robo, if you have a group of people who are making phone calls, you don't have to have the person's consent. They can just, you go down the list, have a narrative, and that's all done through Call Hub. Man, I can't believe I got done before 6 o'clock. I'm impressed by that. So again, Jason Bollinger, my email address is right here. This is my phone number, 501-581-1605. Again, Faulkner County Chairman. You have any questions? Happy to take them in the next 5 minutes, because I think, are we done now?
We're gonna have our blessing, so
All right.
save a few minutes for that.
Okay, well, we'll take a question or two if needed, otherwise we'll move right on to our blessing.
I had one question.
Okay.
Can I eat candy?
Yes.
Can you give me an idea about how much?
It solely depends on how large the campaign is. So what kind of position are you talking about?
Well, say for, the.
So for a JP level race, you're typically talking about probably $300. So very affordable. We've used it recently for a school board race, and you can even have multiple candidates. Say you have different precincts, you can all pitch in as long as you don't mind sharing data. And that's the great thing about this as a county as well. If I have multiple people using eCanvasser, I also get direct feedback to know, well, I know that so-and-so turned out, we talked to this person, so it gives actually better information for the next races as well. So it also helps the cumulative entity as well if you do a shared system.
So, like you got, let's say we had 3 folks running for JT.
Right.
So each one of them will be about
If you have 3 different districts, I mean, you wouldn't obviously, during the primary running for the same district, you would clearly not want to share information. But if you have 3 JPs running, all Republicans running for 3 different districts, it would be one amount. And you just have to create separate profiles, so you can just be able to split that cost among them. It's the same thing for, I've done some campaign consulting, and I'm able to, I think I'm wrapping up, so, you can provide that, and then, question, go ahead.
So when you go to county clerk, you get your voter list on the flash drive, and I always go through and sort mine. When you're looking at how they voted in the other races, most of the people in this state are not registered Republican, they're registered, they're not Democrat or Republican, whatever. So you've got to look at how many races to determine whether someone is leaning towards Republicans or just don't even bother with them anymore. How do you, what do you look for?
Well, it's impossible to make a general statement on that because it depends on the race. So,
Well, I'm talking to JP,
right, so for
or
James,
countywide race.
right, so, well, during the primary, so when you get this information, okay, same thing for GOP Data Center, you're gonna see, you cannot tell that someone voted for Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Okay, so during the actual general election, you cannot verify who that person voted for. What you can see, where there's a partisan lean, is how they vote during the primaries. So there very few people are registered to vote one party or another, but they get asked when they go to vote, do you want a Democrat ballot, Republican ballot, or a nonpartisan ballot? So you see, I know that this person took a Democrat ballot every election, every primary for the last 10 years. Clearly not somebody you're going to target for a messaging for a JP race, but if you might target people who, since 2016, have voted Republican. It just really depends on your race. For a JP race, I would probably use a recent history since 2016 would probably be most useful. And that's a very general answer for that, but I know I can wrap up. So, all right, thank you.
Y'all, please thank us. We have worked so hard on this. We just want to make sure to get the pictures together for us, which is so important for 2024. Thank you, Jason. We're gonna, Heather Smith, would you come, we need a little Jesus before we eat. We're gonna bless our food, and Heather, she's an amazing prayer warrior. Heather Smith, Cleveland County.
Well, you know, that would be every one of us here. So if you'll just go with me in the word of prayer. If you don't mind, stand to your feet for just a second. Father God, in the name of Jesus, thank you so much for the individuals that have taken their time out of this day to hit this ground running. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to come together with like-minded people, but a foundation of Jesus as a cornerstone, Lord. If we can agree to disagree, we know one thing, that Jesus is the Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And Lord, thank you the willingness of everybody in their heart that they've served or they're serving or they're even thinking about serving the Lord. I ask that you bless them right now. And I ask that you just put it on their heart to do what you choose for them to do as the doors open. Lord, if we know not what to do, it says to pray for one another. And in this end time, Lord, thank you for the individuals, the veterans, the individuals that hit the ground every day praying for this nation. And Lord, thank you for the food that we're fixing to partake and for the nourishment of our body, Lord, that we can be strong and mighty. And most of all, Lord, that we take the spiritual word and we apply it daily to honor you, to serve you, and be Christ-like as a Christian, Lord. And we thank you for this day. Thank you for a rally tonight that's going to set the woods on fire. And thank you for this day. Everybody says, amen.
Your dinners, your light box dinners are out. They're all ready. Just go out there, grab them, come back in. We're going to open this wall. We start back at 6:15. So go ahead and grab your dinner, your drinks.
all